Princess Aria stood before the grand mirror in her chambers, her pale blue skin glowing softly in the starlight that streamed through the crystal windows. Today would be her last day in the stellar palace, but there were no celebration bells, no farewell parties, and no loving embraces from her family. The young princess touched the mirror with trembling fingers, studying her reflection. By human standards, she would have been considered breathtakingly beautiful. But among her people, she was flawed. Her telepathic rating was only level 2, far below the royal family's required level 5. This made her, in the eyes of the Empire's nobility, as useful as a broken quantum computer. "Your Highness," a soft voice called from the doorway. "The council awaits." Aria turned to face her only friend in the palace, her personal attendant, Mira. "Do they expect me to thank them for throwing me away like space debris?" Mira's eyes filled with tears. "They're calling it a diplomatic opportunity. The humans requested an alliance, and I'm the perfect garbage gift to send them," Aria finished, her voice bitter but steady. "The unwanted princess for the primitive species. How fitting." The walk to the council chamber felt longer than usual. Every crystal pillar she passed had once represented pride and belonging. Now they only reflected her shame. The other nobles they passed quickly averted their eyes, as if her condition might somehow be contagious. The massive doors of the council chamber opened silently. Inside, 12 of the Empire's highest-ranking nobles sat in a perfect circle, their seats hovering slightly above the ground. In the center stood Aria's father, Emperor Vale, his face carefully blank. "Princess Aria," the head counselor spoke, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You understand why you are here?" "Yes, counselor," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I am to be sent to Earth as part of the peace treaty." As the humans' requested representative, another counselor added quickly, trying to make it sound like an honor rather than a banishment. Aria almost laughed. Everyone knew humans hadn't requested anything specific. They had asked for a diplomatic marriage to seal the alliance, and the Empire had jumped at the chance to solve their embarrassing problem. "The transport leaves in 3 hours," her father announced, speaking for the first time. He didn't meet her eyes. "You will be given all the necessary data about Earth and human customs. Try not to disappoint us further." The dismissal stung, but Aria stood tall. "As you wish, father, though I wonder, what's left to disappoint when you expect nothing?" A shocked murmur ran through the council. Such direct speech was considered primitive, another sign of her defects. But Aria didn't care anymore. In 3 hours, she would leave this world of perfect genetics and cold hearts. Back in her chambers, Mira helped her pack the few personal items she was allowed to take. Most of her royal belongings would stay behind. They were too advanced for Earth, or so the council claimed. "Maybe the humans will be different," Mira whispered as she folded Aria's simplest robes. "They've achieved space travel without telepathy. They must have other kinds of strength." Aria touched the small birthmark on her wrist, another physical flaw that had marked her as less than perfect. "Different would be good," she said softly. "Different means I might finally find somewhere I don't have to apologize for existing." As the transport ship's doors closed behind her, Aria didn't look back at the glittering palace. Instead, she looked forward, toward the small blue planet growing larger in the view screen. Earth, the home of the primitive humans, would be her new home. She smiled slightly. After all, how much worse could it be than living among the perfect people who had never wanted her? The landing pad at the United Earth Government headquarters buzzed with activity as Aria's transport ship touched down. Unlike the silent, floating platforms of her homeworld, Earth's technology was all whirring machines and bright flashing lights. It felt alive, somehow. Through the ship's window, she could see a group of humans waiting. They wore crisp blue uniforms with gold trim, and none of them had the perfect, identical features she was used to seeing among her own people's nobles. Each face was unique, with different shapes, colors, and expressions. "Princess," the ship's pilot announced, Earth's gravity is slightly higher than ours. Please take care when walking." Arya nodded, gathering her simple travel robes around her. The doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and Earth's air rushed in. It smelled different, richer, filled with countless scents she couldn't name. A tall human male stepped forward as she descended the ramp. His dark skin contrasted with the bright smile he offered her, and his eyes, a warm brown color, met hers directly. No one in the Empire would dare make such direct eye contact with royalty. "Princess Arya," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm Captain James Reed, your diplomatic liaison. Welcome to Earth." His voice held none of the cold politeness she was used to. Instead, there was genuine warmth in his words. Arya found herself smiling back before she could stop herself. Another unfortunate habit her tutors had tried to correct. "Thank you, Captain Reed," she replied, using the English she had studied during her journey. "I hope I won't be too much trouble." James looked surprised. "Trouble? Not at all. We're honored to have you here." He gestured to the building behind him. "Would you like to rest first, or would you prefer a tour of the facilities?" The other humans around them watched with open curiosity. None of them tried to hide their interest behind polite masks, as her people would have done. Their honesty was refreshing. "A tour, please," Arya decided. "I'd like to learn about my new home." As they walked, James explained everything they passed. He didn't talk down to her or skip over technical details, assuming she wouldn't understand. Instead, he answered all her questions with patience and enthusiasm. "Our engineering team would love to hear about your people's technology," he mentioned as they passed a research lab. "But only if you're comfortable sharing, of course." Arya stopped walking. "You want to learn from me." In the Empire, everyone had assumed she knew nothing worth teaching. James looked confused. "Of course, every perspective is valuable. Your experience, your knowledge, it's unique. That's what makes it interesting." "Unique," Arya repeated softly. On her world, being unique was a flaw. Here, James said it like it was something special. They reached her new quarters, and Arya gasped. Instead of the sterile, perfect symmetry she was used to, the room was filled with colors. There were real plants in the windows, and the furniture looked comfortable rather than merely functional. "Is something wrong?" James asked, noticing her reaction. "No," Arya touched a soft blanket on the bed. "It's perfect. Different, but perfect." "Well, if you need anything changed." "Actually," Arya interrupted, then caught herself. But James just waited patiently for her to continue. "Could you tell me more about Earth? About your people? Everything here is so different from what I was told." James smiled again, pulling up a chair. "What would you like to know?" Looking at his kind face, Arya felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Maybe being sent to Earth wasn't a punishment after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was a chance to finally be herself. 2 weeks into her stay on Earth, Arya found herself in the middle of what humans called a garden party. Unlike the rigid formal events of the Empire, this gathering was full of laughter, casual conversation, and something called barbecue that filled the air with mouth-watering smells. "Try this," James said, offering her a small piece of grilled meat. "It's my mother's secret recipe." Arya hesitated. In the Empire, eating in public was considered crude. But here she was learning that sharing food brought people together. She took a bite, and her eyes widened with delight. "This is wonderful," she exclaimed, then quickly covered her mouth, expecting disapproval for her outburst. Instead, James's mother beamed with pride. "Finally, someone who appreciates good cooking. Come, dear, you must try the potato salad too." As she was led from dish to dish, Arya noticed something strange. None of the humans wore rank indicators or genetic rating badges. She couldn't tell who was superior to whom. "James," she asked later, as they walked through the garden, "how do your people know their place in society without genetic rankings?" He looked puzzled. We don't have fixed places. People can change their position through hard work, learning, and sometimes just by finding what they're good at. But how do you maintain order? We have laws and social structures, but they're based on actions and choices, not birth or genetics. He picked a flower and handed it to her. Like this garden. Different plants need different conditions to grow. Forcing them all to grow the same way would kill most of them. Arya twirled the flower in her fingers. On her world, gardens were perfectly symmetrical, every plant identical. This earth garden was wild with variety, yet somehow more beautiful. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. A research team had gotten trapped in a collapsed underground lab. Without thinking, Arya rushed with James to the scene. The support beams are too unstable, one engineer reported. We can't get close enough to reach them. Arya stepped forward. I can help. My telepathy might be weak by Empire standards, but I can sense if people are alive within 20 meters. The rescue team looked at James, who nodded immediately. Any help is valuable. What do you need? Using her gift, Arya guided the rescue team through the safest path. Her telepathy might not be strong enough to read minds like the Empire's nobles, but it was perfect for detecting life signs and potential dangers. 3 hours later, all researchers were safely rescued. To Arya's shock, people kept thanking her, praising her quick thinking and unique abilities. I don't understand, she told James as they watched the medical team check the rescued scientists. In the Empire, my telepathy level would be considered useless. But it just saved 6 lives, James pointed out. Seems pretty useful to me. Arya felt tears in her eyes. The Empire always said humans were primitive because you solve problems differently than we do. Different doesn't mean primitive, James said softly. Sometimes it just means finding new ways to do things. Like you did today. As they walked back to the party, which had turned into an impromptu celebration of the successful rescue, Arya realized something. Every flaw the Empire had condemned her for, her emotional nature, her weaker telepathy, her preference for practical solutions over protocol, was considered a strength here on Earth. James, she said, stopping under a blooming cherry tree, thank you for showing me that being different isn't wrong. He smiled, and Arya felt her heart skip a beat. Another flaw she was starting to treasure. Arya sat in Earth's diplomatic conference room, watching the holographic transmission from the Empire with a growing sense of dread. The council members' perfect faces showed clear disapproval as they reviewed Earth's latest technological achievements. These advancements, the head counselor said, his voice cold, seem unusually rapid for a non-telepathic species. James stood beside Arya's chair, his presence giving her strength. Earth has always valued innovation, he replied diplomatically. We're eager to share our discoveries with our allies. Allies? Another counselor scoffed. The alliance was meant to keep you primitive humans in check, not encourage your unpredictable development. Arya felt her hands tighten into fists. 3 months ago, she would have accepted such insults silently. Now, they made her angry. Earth's developments are impressive precisely because they think differently, she said, speaking up during a council meeting for the first time in her life. Their diversity breeds creativity. The council members looked shocked at her intervention. Her father, the Emperor, finally spoke. Daughter, you seem to have grown, attached to these humans. The way he said it made it sound like she had caught a disease. But before Arya could respond, the transmission was interrupted by an urgent message from Earth's defense systems. Multiple Empire ships just dropped out of hyperspace, the defense officer reported. They're approaching Earth's orbit. James quickly checked his datapad. We haven't received any diplomatic notice of Imperial vessels entering our space. The Council's image flickered back. We are merely conducting a routine inspection of our cultural ambassador, the head counselor announced. Surely you have nothing to hide. Arya stood up, her voice steady. The treaty doesn't allow for unannounced military inspections. This is a violation of our agreement. Our agreement? Her father's voice was sharp. "You forget your place, daughter. You were sent to Earth as a gesture of imperial generosity. We can withdraw that gesture at any time." The meeting ended with thinly veiled threats from both sides. As the hologram faded, Arya felt her legs shake. James quickly pulled up a chair for her. "They're scared," she said quietly. "The Empire didn't expect Earth to advance so quickly. They didn't expect me to." She trailed off, looking at James. "To what?" he asked softly, taking her hand. "To find happiness here. To learn that everything they taught me about humans being primitive was wrong." She squeezed his hand. "To fall in love." James's eyes widened, but before he could respond, another alert sounded. More Empire ships were arriving. "They'll try to take me back," Arya said, standing up. "They'll use me as an excuse to start a conflict." "We won't let them," James replied firmly. "Earth protects its own." The words hit Arya like a wave of warmth. Its own. She was one of them now. Moving on instinct, she stepped closer to James. "If I were to formally request Earth's protection, not as an imperial princess, but as someone seeking asylum." "You'd have it," James said immediately. "But Arya, are you sure? The Empire might see it as a complete betrayal." She touched his face gently. "They betrayed me first, when they decided I was unworthy because I was different. Earth showed me that different can be beautiful." As they rushed to prepare Earth's diplomatic response to the Empire's show of force, Arya felt strangely calm. For the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to be what others wanted. She was choosing her own path, even if it led to conflict. And looking at James's determined face as he worked to protect both her and his planet, she knew she was choosing right. Arya sat in Earth's medical center, staring at the holographic scan floating above the examination table. The human doctor had run the test 3 times now, and each time showed the same impossible result. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The Empire scientists said our species couldn't." She touched her stomach gently, afraid that if she moved too quickly, this dream would shatter. Dr. Wilson, a kind-faced woman with gray hair, smiled warmly. "Well, Princess, it seems they were wrong. You're definitely pregnant. About 6 weeks along." James, who had been standing silently by Arya's side, finally found his voice. "But how?" "Every genetic study the Empire shared said humans and their species were incompatible. That's what makes this so fascinating," Dr. Wilson said, adjusting the hologram to show more detail. "Look at how the DNA is combining. Human genetics are remarkably adaptable, more than any other species we've encountered. Your child is creating entirely new genetic patterns." Arya felt tears running down her cheeks. On her world, crying in public would have been shameful. Here, Dr. Wilson simply handed her a tissue with a gentle pat on her shoulder. "The Empire was so focused on keeping their genetics pure," Arya said, watching the tiny life glowing in the hologram. "They'd never considered that genetic diversity might be a strength. That's evolution for you," Dr. Wilson explained. "Humans survived on Earth because we could adapt. Different groups develop different traits based on their environments. What your people call genetic impurity, we call survival." James took Arya's hand. "Are they both healthy?" "Perfectly," Dr. Wilson assured them. "The fetus is developing normally, just with some unique characteristics. The combination of human adaptability and your species' natural abilities seems to be creating something extraordinary." As they left the medical center, Arya noticed her hands were shaking. James led her to a quiet garden, her favorite spot on the base now. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I know this is a lot to process. The Empire told us that mixing our genes with other species would weaken us," Arya said, placing a hand on her stomach. "They said staying pure made us superior, but they were wrong about everything." She looked up at the sky, where Earth's defense ships patrolled, watching for more Imperial vessels. "My people's so-called genetic perfection has made us rigid, unable to change. But humans, you're imperfect, beautiful species. You're constantly evolving, growing, becoming more than you were. James wrapped his arms around her. What do you want to do? The Empire needs to know the truth, she said firmly. Not just about the baby, but about everything they're wrong about. Human genetics aren't primitive. They're advanced in a way my people never understood. They might not want to hear it, James warned. And when they find out about the baby, they'll either see it as proof that humans are more remarkable than they thought, Arya finished, or as a threat to their perfect genetic hierarchy. She turned to face him. Either way, I don't care. This child is a miracle. Living proof that different doesn't mean worse. It means new possibilities. A small kick from within made her gasp. James placed his hand next to hers, and they felt their child move together. The first of their kind, James said proudly. A bridge between our peoples. Arya smiled through her tears. The Empire called me unworthy because I wasn't perfect enough. But this baby proves that perfection isn't about purity. It's about the beauty of combination, of change, of love. Above them, Earth's ships continued their patrol, ready to defend their planet and its newest family from whatever the Empire might do next. The Imperial flagship hung in Earth's orbit like a crystal dagger, its perfect geometric shape a stark contrast to the curved lines of Earth's defense fleet. Inside Earth's main conference room, Arya stood tall as her father's hologram towered before her. This abomination cannot be allowed to exist, Emperor Vale declared, his perfect features twisted with disgust. You will return to the Empire immediately for genetic cleansing. Arya felt James tense beside her, but she kept her voice steady. No, father. I'm staying on Earth. My child is not an abomination. It's a miracle. Miracle. The Emperor laughed coldly. Your human parasite has corrupted your mind, as well as your body. Guards, prepare to teleport the princess. The room's lights flickered as Imperial technology tried to lock onto Arya's position, but nothing happened. I'm afraid that won't work, Earth's chief scientist said, stepping forward. We've developed shields specifically tuned to block Imperial teleportation. Princess Arya is under Earth's protection now. The Emperor's face darkened. You dare interfere with Imperial family matters. Remember your place, humans. Our place. James spoke up, his hand finding Arya's. Our place is standing beside those we love, protecting those who need protection. Something your empire seems to have forgotten. Arya watched her father's face change as he noticed their joined hands. For a moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, but fear. The Imperial fleet will remove her by force if necessary, he threatened. Your primitive weapons cannot stop us. Actually, Arya said, pulling up a holographic display, Earth's primitive weapons are far more advanced than you think. They've been learning, adapting, improving. Everything the Empire refuses to do. She showed scanned results of the Imperial ships. Your vessels are perfect, unchanged for 1,000 years. But Earth's ships, she gestured to the Earth fleet, they get better every day, just like their people. Impossible, another council member sputtered. Their genetic limitations are their greatest strength, Arya interrupted. Humans adapt. They change. They grow stronger through diversity, not weaker. My child proves it. The Emperor slammed his fist down. Enough. You have 1 hour to surrender the princess, or we will open fire. As the hologram vanished, the room burst into activity. Defense plans were made, ships were positioned, and evacuation protocols were prepared. I'm sorry, Arya told James as they hurried to the command center. I never wanted to bring war to your world. Hey, he stopped, turning her to face him. You didn't bring this war. The Empire's fear and pride did, and we're ready for them. In the command center, displays showed hundreds of Earth ships moving into position. But they weren't alone. To everyone's shock, ships from other alien races began appearing, species who had also been labeled primitive by the Empire. We stand with Earth, their representatives declared. The Empire's age of genetic supremacy must end. Arya watched in amazement as the combined fleet grew larger than the Imperial force. Her father had fought to find Earth isolated and weak. Instead, his actions had united those who believed in change and growth over static perfection. Your Highness, an aide rushed in. We're receiving transmissions from within the Empire. Younger nobles, colony worlds. They're speaking out in your support. Your story has inspired them to question the old ways. Arya squeezed James's hand, feeling their child move within her. The Empire had meant to silence her by sending her away. Instead, they had given her a voice that would change their civilization forever. The hour is almost up, James said softly. Are you ready? Arya straightened her shoulders. Yes. It's time to show the Empire that their unworthy princess found something worth fighting for. The Great Hall of the United Earth Government was packed with representatives from 100 worlds. Arya stood at the podium, her 8-month pregnant belly visible beneath her simple Earth-style dress. The Empire's delegation sat to one side, their perfect faces unable to hide their discomfort at being surrounded by so many lesser species. 3 months ago, Arya began, her voice clear and strong. The Empire threatened war because they feared change. Today, we sign a new treaty, not between superior and inferior peoples, but between equals. She looked at her father, who sat stiffly among the Imperial nobles. The failed attack on Earth had revealed the Empire's weakness. Their perfect, unchanging fleet had been no match for Earth's adaptable technology and the combined forces of their allies. I was sent to Earth as an unwanted gift, she continued, deemed unworthy because I didn't meet the Empire's standards of perfection. But Earth taught me that imperfection is not weakness. It is the source of strength, growth, and evolution. Screens around the hall displayed the scientific data from her pregnancy. My child, who the Empire called an abomination, proves that diversity brings new strength. Human adaptability combined with Imperial traits has created something unprecedented, a bridge between our peoples that will grow stronger with each generation. James stepped up beside her, placing the supportive hand on her back. In the audience, she could see younger Imperial nobles nodding, many of them part of the growing movement for change within the Empire. Therefore, Arya announced, I hereby renounce my claim to the Imperial throne. A gasp went through the crowd. Instead, I choose to be Earth's ambassador to the stars, working to build understanding between all peoples, perfect and imperfect alike. Her father stood up suddenly. The hall went quiet, security forces tensing. But when he spoke, his voice held something new. Uncertainty. Daughter, he said, you would give up your heritage, your destiny. Arya smiled gently. No, father. I'm embracing a new destiny. The Empire's obsession with genetic purity has left us frozen, unable to grow. Look around this room. See how many different peoples have gathered here. Each one brings unique strengths, unique perspectives. She touched her belly as her baby kicked. My child will have the best of both worlds, Imperial gifts and human adaptability. They will be proof that we grow stronger together, not weaker. The young nobles in the Imperial delegation began to stand, one by one, removing their genetic rating badges and letting them fall. The sound of dozens of badges hitting the floor echoed through the hall. The age of genetic supremacy is ending, Arya declared, not through war, but through understanding, not through force, but through love. She held up the new treaty. This document guarantees equal rights and protections for all peoples, including those the Empire once called primitive. It establishes new protocols for genetic research focused on healing rather than ranking, and it officially recognizes Earth as a full partner in galactic affairs. As she signed the document, her father slowly walked to the podium. For a long moment he looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. You have your mother's courage, he said softly, then picked up the pen. Later, in the garden where she and James had first begun to fall in love, Arya watched the celebrations through the window. Earth's night sky was filled with ships from dozens of worlds, their lights dancing like stars. Was it worth it? James asked, holding her close. Giving up your crown? Arya felt their baby move and smiled. I didn't give up anything. I gained everything. Love, freedom, purpose. The Empire wanted me to be perfect. Earth taught me to be myself. Above them, fireworks bloomed against the sky, celebrating not the victory of one people over another, but the birth of a new way forward, together.